Hello and welcome to today's Fireside chat with our CEO of FenxLabs, Carl Eidsgard. Hello, everybody, and welcome.
Oh, thank you for having me.
It's a real pleasure. It's a real pleasure. Okay, so I'm just looking at who we have in the room. So Nigel, I see. Nigel, hi. Thank you for joining us. Good to see you again.
Hi, Aaron. How you doing?
Not too bad, thanks. I was just telling everyone that I'd rather be lying on a hot, sunny beach somewhere, but as it is, stuck in the rainy old UK. But there you go. How about yourself? Are you well?
Yeah, doing good, thank you. Yeah, good, exactly. Yeah, I know the feeling. It's getting cold here.
Yes. I think we have some snow forecasts later today. Carl, I don't know how it is in Amsterdam. Is it still cold
It's
there?
just very chilly out at the moment. But no snow, luckily. But I'm heading home to Norway in the beginning of December, so I'm guaranteed to see some snow at some point.
Yeah, I think that's guaranteed. Okay. Well, I'm just looking at the time, and I guess we may have a few people coming in later on. So let me go ahead and make an intro, if that's okay. So thank you everybody for joining today's webinar with myself, Aaron Davis, and Carl Eidsgard, the founder and CEO of FenxLabs. It goes without saying that there continues to be a great degree of hype around the concept of AI, its capabilities, and what it means for the future of humanity. So the goal behind today's webinar is to start by deconstructing and more specifically demystifying the topic, whilst we look to delve into the capabilities that FenxLabs offer to our clients across multiple industries. Following our fireside chat with Carl today, I'll be opening the discussion up to the floor and very much hope that you'll feel encouraged to ask questions and share perspectives, and ultimately leave today's webinar feeling that you've gained a range of valuable insights. So, without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker, Carl. Welcome, Carl.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to see me speak. Looking forward to it.
Excellent stuff. Okay, so before we get into the details of common misconceptions around AI, could you maybe provide us with a succinct overview of what FenxLabs do, along with your own personal vision for the company?
Definitely. Yeah, so I should probably start by introducing myself and sort of what background I had to be speaking about AI. And I have a little bit of a strange background. Back in the day, I wanted to become an economist, but I went to business school, took up some courses. But over the course of my time in business school, I actually read this book about artificial intelligence, which just changed my outlook on sort of the economy, how technology would shape the future. And I also realized very quickly that I would probably see this in my lifetime. So I would see this unfold in my lifetime. Very quickly, I decided to just abandon business school and start working in tech instead. So over the course of the last 15 years or so, I've worked for Oracle, I've worked for Microsoft, I've worked for Samsung. So I've got sort of the practical aspect of it rather than the academic element to it. So I just want to say that right off the bat before we get going here. Now, we are actually ahead of the schedule that I thought we would be on. So I thought that this would start entering, or where we are now, I roughly thought that we would be there in about a decade from now. So when OpenAI released ChatGPT back 2 years ago now, it's actually been 2 years, that came as a bombshell to me. And I say that as someone who, was in that environment and has been in it for a while. And also followed all of the research that's been leading up to where we are right now. So it caught me completely by surprise. So I very quickly realized that something had to be done because the nature and the speed at which this happened, this development, was so quick that I think that a lot of people didn't really have the time to adjust to it properly. Which means that people like myself, people who've been thinking about this for a really long time, we have a special responsibility to step up. And FenxLabs is the culmination of that responsibility in many ways, where the end goal is that we want to drive adoption and we want to drive beneficial adoption. And what that means is essentially democratizing AI in such a way that everyone benefits from it, because that's not a guarantee by any stretch of the imagination.
It's not. And I think AI is a kind of catch-all term that gets thrown around a lot. People have got very different ideas about what it actually is. So to strip it all the way back, how would you, Carl, define AI for someone with no technical background, for example?
So it's very hard, right? Because there's two components to this. It's how artificial intelligence works, which in and by itself is massively complex, but also sort of simple. So I'm gonna start with just like a speed run of how it works. So artificial intelligence is a catch-all term in computer science for systems that mimic human intelligence, right? Within artificial intelligence, you've got a subset of techniques referred to as machine learning. And within machine learning, you have a technique more specifically known as deep learning, which is all the rage these days. Everything else stripped aside. The way that machine learning works is through prediction. So it tries to use data that it already has to predict the next data point based off of existing data, right? And it turns out that if you just scale this up with compute or enough compute and enough data, right, you end up with a system that is able or that has a world model, right? But in between the world model that it has and the output that, say, ChatGPT generates, there is this whole thing that we don't know how it works, right? So I just want to come out and say that we don't actually know how artificial intelligence works. There comes this point where beyond it, like, it's all dark, right? This is, for most people, not very useful information because most people are in the mindset, well, how do I use it? Well, one word for you, and that's automation, right? That's the key value statement for anyone looking to adopt AI is think in terms of automation.
Absolutely. And I think there is, coupled to that, there's often a fear out there that AI will replace human jobs or even become something beyond our control, as you've kind of alluded to. So how would you define in layman's terms, if you like, what AI can actually do right now and what it cannot do right now? Where are the misconceptions, if you like?
Yeah, so first off, I just want to say that there's no one in the AI industry that talks about control. Because the way that we conceptualize artificial intelligence is as a system that would have the same relationship to us as a 3-year-old would have to a 30-year-old, right? There is no way that we can that a 3-year-old can outsmart a 30-year-old. I don't think there exists a universe where that is a thing. So the term that we talk about is alignment, right? How do we get these systems to work alongside us, not in our benefit or in a setting where we control it, because that is there's no serious AI researcher out there that will talk about this in terms of control. And I do think that at some point, because these systems, they do develop very quickly, right? So we are most likely in what we can refer to as the intelligence explosion. We just don't know it yet. So the next 5 years is going to be super duper interesting to sort of just society and what we can do as a whole. Now, in terms of what it can and can't do, for all practical purposes, 99% of anything that you can think of, AI can probably do, right? The one thing that we are now chasing after is something called generalization, or artificial general intelligence, more specifically. And when we're chasing after that, what we're actually chasing after is not sort of the day-to-day tasks or how to do them better necessarily, but we are chasing after a system where we can basically just feed in all or the sum total of all of human knowledge and use artificial intelligence to extrapolate new knowledge from all the knowledge that we've gathered over, call it, the last 12,000 years of civilization. So that means a cure for cancer, right? It means interstellar travel. Like, the really exotic stuff is what we're chasing after. But for most people, AI, the current generation of, say, 4.0, or the current generation of generative AI models, can most likely solve almost anything that you can come up with in your day-to-day task.
So how would you address the popular myth that AI is a kind of Pandora's box, difficult to understand, but even harder to control? And really, more specifically, how does FenxLabs approach transparency in AI take shape?
Yeah, so just to address the transparency bit first, because that element of it is actually very difficult to get right. So the reason why open AI isn't really open is because we do foresee this, call it challenge, when it comes to just overall holistic security when we break this ground, right? So these systems are very powerful, right? And they can be used for or to cause just as much good as they can be used to create as much harm, right? So they can be just as harmful as they can be good. So that means that transparency is a fine line that needs to be threaded. And the way that we solve this is that we are transparent in, call it, the engineering. So that means that if you come to us and you engage us for a solution, you will know how that is built. And the same goes for anyone that wants to come in after and audit the solution. They will know how it's built. But we do keep the research element of this very tight to our chest, because the research element, that's where this becomes really exotic, and where, call it, malicious actors, which is what we are afraid of, might come in and use that research for something that we absolutely do not want them to do. So we have elected to keep the research close to our chest, at least until there is some sort of consensus around how we responsibly open source the research that we do.
Would you delegate that responsibility to worldwide governments and committees and tribunals, or do you feel there's a better way to do that?
Well, I mean, the first thing, so I'm not sure that there is any government or regulatory body out there equipped to have that conversation at this point in time. I know that there will be efforts put forward in the next few years on sort of the governmental side of things, but I really do think that this is something that, you know, all the AI laboratories, all of the sort of research bodies out there, we need to come together and we need to have some sort of conversation about how we do this responsibly, right? Because responsibility is paramount in the world that we live in. And back to sort of your Pandora's box, this is a Pandora's box. I think that all scientific and technological progress is a bit of a Pandora's box. The thing that sort of sets this apart from, say, the nuclear bomb or fire, if we want to go back and be really primitive about it, is that we may be creating a separate species that can rival or what makes us the apex predator on the planet, right? Which is our intellect, our ability to organize based on that intellect. So that is definitely a consideration that we need to take into account when we do research and also when we engineer stuff. So yeah.
Interesting. And you know, if I think about the potential use cases, it's kind of almost unlimited in its scope in terms of the domains, the traditional industries that can be kind of augmented, disrupted, accelerated, whichever way you want to phrase that. If we think about sectors like, for example, cybersecurity or finance, banking, what are some of the practical use cases that you've seen AI add value in those areas?
So I don't think there is sort of like a particular domain that I would like to highlight here. It's more a generalization, because at the end of the day, you know, only the imagination puts limitations on what it is that can be done. This is practically the world that we live in today. So if you have a great idea, we would like to hear about it and maybe help you build it out. But that being said, when it comes to different industries, I think that AI will hit a little bit differently and at different times. So if we take cybersecurity, for instance, which is one of the first areas that we applied our knowledge to, we did that because that's time sensitive, right? It's just a matter of time before the attacking side in a cybersecurity engagement figures out a way to automate attacks, which means that we can have truly catastrophic results if someone figures out how to do that, and call it, the defending side doesn't have any sort of automated defense. So we actually decided to go out and create an automated SOC solution for that particular case. Luckily, we haven't seen that yet, but I think that's just a matter of time before we do. In finance, there's not the same clock, and it's also worth stressing that finance and cybersecurity also one of the first adopters of AI. But the difference is that when it comes to, say, finance, the way that they've applied AI is in statistics, right? So they've got a whole bunch of, call it technical signals, that they're applying machine learning algorithms to try and find patterns, right? Or predict based on pattern analysis. Now you can actually do something a little bit different, which is that you can embed context into this, right? So I think that there is a lot of information that is lost when you just look at statistics, because you have no, or you don't have any context behind the data points. For the first time in sort of machine learning history, you can actually, or in the history of call it computers, you can actually go out and you can gather context to each and every data point and reinforce the statistics that you have with something that is contextual, which means that you get to know your customers on a one-to-one level. You get to, or you can understand sort of what their pain points are, how they behave in a much better way than you could before. So, the potential is there. I've yet to see any banks or financial institutions fully capitalize on the potential that's on the table here. But I hope, we can work on some of those cases down the line. And I also hope that we see more of that moving forward.
I agree with that. So another aspect of what FenxLabs are offering is operating as an applied AI lab. Could you explain what that means in practical terms? What kind of projects are on the horizon in that regard? How do they align with client needs?
So the best way of conceptualizing an applied AI lab is as downstream from the frontier model labs. So the frontier model labs would be laboratories like OpenAI or Anthropic or Google DeepMind. What they do is that they develop models, right? And that's all the rage. Everyone hears about the models. But no one is talking about how you structure and organize the models into systems that can do more. We are slowly starting to introduce that into the mix, which is the term AI agents, which some of you may or may not have heard of, but that's really where it's at for us, right? So we are researching AI agents, or more specifically, how to chain models together in a system of models that can do more than just one individual model can do on its own. So that is sort of the big difference from a frontier model lab to an applied AI lab.
There was a wonderful example used not long ago, which was, let's assume that ChatGPT is like having one PhD student that works for you. They don't need coffee breaks. They're super intelligent. They know almost everything there is to know. Whereas Agentic AI is like having 500 of those PhD students, all comparing notes, talking to each other, getting wiser every minute. So the capabilities are clearly, it's a paradigm shift, to use a well-worn phrase. It's the next frontier in that regard. One of the areas that we're all excited about is our MVP for horizon scanning. So would you like to maybe just give a brief overview of what horizon scanning is in this sense, and how the tool itself helps organizations stay ahead of trends and threats?
For sure. So the Horizon Scanner was born from a need that we had internally to just do risk management in a better way. So because we are a small organization, and because there's also inherently a lot of risk to what it is that we do, we needed a tool internally that could sort through and generate just risk reports for us based off of signals that we had coming in. And that is a tool that served us, it's had great utility for us in the last, I want to say, 4 months since we first started engineering it out. And then obviously, what was that? I can't remember, two weeks ago, we had an election in the United States, which, regardless of what you think about politics, at least, or the outcome of that election, it does introduce risk, right? Uncertainty into the system. So what we decided to do is, well, seeing as this tool has been so massively useful to us, why don't we release it on our platform, which has also been in the pipeline for some time, and give everyone access to it. And the end goal here is that you should be able, so the Horizon Scanner is not the only solution that we're working on, but it's the first one that we've released on the platform. And the end goal here is that you can have your own personalized version of this. And the same goes for any solution that we release in the future. You should be able to come to us and get your own customized version of that solution. Outside of sort of, if you just have a good idea and you want to see that implemented with AI, we also take those kinds of cases. So yeah, that's the point.
You're almost going to, if I think of what Splunk used to do as an example, machine learning data, get more insights, get valuable recommendations based on your data. This is almost the next generation of putting the AI lens on that. So chat with your data, it gets more and more intelligent about your organization. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so the chat with your data, that's also a solution that we're working on. And that will be the next sort of thing that we deploy on the platform. Very simply put, if you wanted to deconstruct data sets, if you wanted to do something that was really heavy, call it, when it comes to data discovery in the past, you needed a whole platform and you needed a whole organization geared towards doing that, right? So you needed some sort of big data analytics solution. In addition to that, you also needed data engineers and data scientists just to maintain the solution and get actual insights from the data stored within it. We are aiming to release a solution that just allows AI to take over that task. I know that that's bad news for most data engineers out there, but the way that we look at this is not in terms of job security. This is just one of those things that should be democratized, because the more people that have access to, call it, data engineering and data science capabilities, the more they can get done, right? And we are aiming to lower that barrier to entry when it comes to getting insights from your data. That's what we're trying to do with that. So stay tuned.
Yes, more to come on that, I think.
Yes, more to come.
Let's take a sharp right turn and let's touch on the subject of ethics. Now, we know AI has huge potential, but with that, of course, comes responsibility. So from your perspective as CEO, how does FenxLabs ensure that our products align with ethical standards? And why is that important to us as an organization, do you feel?
It should be. So AI ethics is massively important because it touches on how we interact with these systems, right? So hopefully I've sort of put across the fact that the power and the potential that these systems hold cuts both ways, right? And they, if used for harm, that, call it, slope is very, it comes very subtly, right? So the way that a bad outcome can be produced by using these systems is, it's a razor-sharp margin for that. So say that you want to create a system that ranks, say, a job applicants, right? Just to take something simple. Well, you've now introduced this system that not only knows a whole lot about people, right, or the people that sign up for that platform, but you also know sort of a generalized profile of them that you can then use for whatever. And say that an autocratic regime somewhere takes over and has access to this data, then all of a sudden what they can do with that, right? We do live in this world where this now is a possibility. What they can do with that is potentially disastrous. And this is something that we need to keep in mind as we build out stuff. It is, well, how do we have the appropriate kill switches? How do we ensure that these systems aren't used for profiling, right? And the EU, as the first legislative body, has come out and they've done sort of the bare minimum on this. So we do adhere to those rules, but we don't think that there is any legislative body out there that goes far enough in terms of just protecting, or making this into something that's beneficial for humanity. Like that's the goal here. That's what we're shooting for.
Absolutely. And I can recall, on a personal note, during the COVID lockdowns, I had a little bit of spare time and I ended up penning a noveletta, if I can call that, a very short story. And it was just about the concept of AI falling into the wrong hands, rogue government. with ill intent. And I'd like to think it was an interesting kind of yarn, but the point was there, and this is a very clear and present danger, that's kind of out there, which is why it's kind of important to have kind of a global consensus in a sense, the right kind of guardrails in place to try and prevent this happening, because clearly could be a disastrous outcome. I believe there were quite a few examples of this, one being a major bank in Singapore, where the chief of staff was on a video call supposedly with the CEO saying, I want you to transfer 50 million Singapore dollars to this account, did all the usual checks and said, well, I'm not entirely sure about this, so called the rest of the executive team into the room. Same thing again, the CEO says, yes, it's definitely me, please go ahead and make that transfer. Of course, it turned out it wasn't. And it was a frightfully kind of realistic imitation, but there's a great example, right, of the cost of this. So yeah, I think it's quite important. So looking at a few real world examples, we talked a little bit about cybersecurity. If we think of, say, I don't know, the insurance industry, so they're constantly having to rely on the calculation of premiums and threats and different levels of propensity. A tool that we're building, Horizon Scanning being a good case in point, can you give any real world examples of how that would add value or how it would make life easier for companies that are tasked with those calculations?
Yeah, so the Horizon Scanner is very much a macro tool. So it doesn't go in and look at specific data. We can set it up that way, but then subject to what we spoke about earlier, the ethical deployment of this, because we don't want to introduce a situation where we have a system that basically calculates premiums based off of individual factors. Now, luckily, there is legislation in place to combat that. But call it in insurance, it's very much a macro tool, right? Where what we want to do is we want to just show you the trends in a report that can happen, right? So that you have all of the different trends and all of the different risk elements. You've got them there, and you've got a high-level overview of how something or how a certain change might affect your overall risk image. But then it's also up to you to, in turn, use that information to something useful. So we don't, when it comes to insurance or when it comes to anywhere where there is basically an individual rate for something that needs to be set, we are a little hesitant to take a Horizon Scanning tool and that macro risk image and extrapolate from that into individual pricing, right? So that is, we still want a little bit of a disconnect in between those two, for sure. But luckily, insurance have been using machine learning for years, right? So this is how they arrive at the prices that they set for the premiums that they have, is through machine learning. And there is this implicit risk calculation that's going on in between. So the Horizon Scanner, in an ideal world, would do the macro risks that can then be ingested into a risk calculation that's done on the existing systems that they've already got. So that is one of the ways that this could be done. And we haven't, I suppose, looked into insurance specifically yet, but definitely one of those areas that we want to look at in closer detail.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Carl. That's been illuminating. I've certainly kind of taken a lot out of that. What I thought we might like to do next is to speak to our remaining audience members in the sense of a Q&A, and if anyone does have any further questions they would like to throw in the mix, please feel free to raise a hand. Nigel, I think you're still tuned in. I wondered if you had any kind of comments on what you've heard so far. Possibly not. Maybe gone to make coffee.
No, I'm still here. So I was just finding the mute button.
That's all right.
Yeah.
So Nigel, how have you found the content so far? Did anything kind of really resonate with you?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested to know a little bit more maybe around the Horizon Scanning tool, how you see that being used. you know, anything that can take away the overhead of lots of research and big research teams going out, I can certainly see the benefit of that. And I guess what I'm interested in, how much real time information is this giving leadership teams? Maybe that's my question.
Yeah, so we've hooked it up to a whole bunch of different data sources. At least a generic solution that is on our platform at the moment, that's hooked up to a whole bunch of different data sources, and it does ingest data from them in real time. Now, the one thing we haven't done is hook it up to, say, news sources, which would be the next sort of iteration of this. The news sources aren't necessarily all that useful for the content that it generates itself, but it is, call it, useful for situational awareness, right? So there is no, or news sources in this particular setup wouldn't ingest news as is and create reports on news, because that's not beneficial to really anyone, simply because the accuracy in news isn't quite there. Like you don't know the final outcome of a piece of news until maybe a month after the fact, right? But for contextual understanding of where it is that we are and the environment, that could be useful as a quality of life update. But that said, it is real-time data that it is basing everything in the report off of. So when you generate a report, that is real-time information.
Yes, thank you.
So what we can do, Nigel, if it's interesting, following the webinar, I'll send you an email. We'll give you access to the platform. Excuse me. If you'd like to log in, we'll give you a handful of free credits so you can run some simulated search-based scenarios through it. We have got some example reports we can share with you as well. And if you wanted to have a demonstration, we'll be more than happy to kind of give you a run through of that. So yeah, we can set that up. But from our perspective, we're pretty excited with the capabilities of it, and the level of detail that it can pull out in its current format without being, customized or tweaked is already quite impressive. So we see lots of potential use cases cross industry as the adoption grows and grows. So yeah, happy to kind of follow up on that.
For sure. And also, if you have any rough ideas or any pain points in your day-to-day, feel free to come to us with that as well, and let's see if we can't automate it or make your life a little easier.
Great, thank you.
Excellent. Well, I think if that is it in terms of Q&A, we'll say thank you very much to everyone for attending today. If you're watching post-event on YouTube, hello, and thank you for watching also. If you do require any further information on FenxLabs, you want to get in touch with Carl, all of that information will be contained in the episode description. And until next time, we wish you a pleasant rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carl.
All right. Bye now.
Bye.